Well, it's both symbolic and substantive in terms of the security needs that it can address. For a long time, China has perceived itself as a great power that has significant interests, regional and even global in a variety of ways. And as part of Xi Jinping's China dream of building a stronger country that's recognized more in the world, there's also an effort to build China into more of a maritime power. And while Xi Jinping is presiding over the latest developments, this has been ongoing for some time. And an important part of the naval development dream, you might say, is a carrier development dream. China, of course, this is a modest beginning, but China had to start somewhere, and it has made some basic progress. China will likely use its aircraft carrier or carriers over time in a wide range of contingencies, a growing range of contingencies, albeit starting from a rather low baseline. And as the PLA Major General Chen Lihua has said, what matters is not whether or not you have an aircraft carrier, but what you do with your aircraft carrier. So the world will be watching what China does with its aircraft carrier or aircraft carriers over time. Already with China's so-called starter carrier, Liaoning, there's significant potential in the near future to take it overseas for some basic naval diplomacy, to show the flag, so to speak. And this will already have tremendous symbolic and psychological effects. While not nearly as large as a U.S. Nimitz-style Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, it's large and impressive. It's a larger vessel than most navies have in their possession, and so it will cast a long shadow, so to speak. There are also a variety of other sort of lower barrier to entry type missions that China can use its first aircraft carrier for in the fairly near future. Some form of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, perhaps some type of non-combatant evacuation operations from an unstable or dangerous area, just as we've seen PLA Navy warships used to evacuate Chinese citizens, over 500 of them, as well as a variety of foreign nationals from Yemen, as that nation unfortunately descended into civil war. These types of things that don't involve any type of combat with another capable navy should be available to China in the near term. Even as it's just mastered some very basic aircraft carrier operations. Now, on top of that, there are also some less constructive roles that an aircraft carrier might play for China in the foreseeable future. Increased maneuvers and operations in the South China Sea in a way that could be somewhat intimidating to the Philippines and Vietnam, neighbors that have air forces that are not nearly as capable and developed as China's. And this is not just speculation on my part. You can see in a variety of Chinese writings just this sort of application mentioned, including by a PLA Navy officer who played a major role in China's earlier military operations in the South China Sea. Beyond that, things really start to become more difficult for China. I think there's every reason to believe that China will get to various levels of capability over time, but this will be a very effort-intensive, in some ways risky and difficult effort. So looking beyond those sort of lower end type or closer in type applications, China will be able over time to use perhaps even Liaoning, its first aircraft carrier, to extend some form of air cover, a sort of air defense umbrella over PLA Navy warships operating outside the range of land-based air defenses. That, I think, will be a major direction of Chinese, you could even say combat-relevant development for its deck aviation capabilities. China's made some solid progress so far. Again, as with so many things in China's development, this is initially starting from a low baseline. China's adopting a cautious and I think a wise crawl, walk, run approach here. So we saw that the Liaoning, China's first aircraft carrier, the former Ukrainian hull Liaoning, was finally commissioned in September 2012 after the project was initiated officially in August 2004. Hence its official designation in Chinese military programmatic nomenclature as the Type 048 program. By November, we saw the first carrier-based takeoffs and landings of the J-15, China's J-15 fighter aircraft. So this is a case of China going from having much less in the way of capability than some other developing countries in terms of deck aviation, to becoming, by November 2012, only the 5th country in the world to have accomplished those carrier-based takeoffs and landings. That is no small achievement for China. That is not easy to do at all. So already that's a real feather in China's cap that China accomplished that. Now, that being said, the progress has really been incremental, and it's relying heavily on foreign knowledge. The fact that the U.S. and other countries have literally spent decades inventing, fine-tuning, and mastering carrier operations. So there are many aspects of carrier operations that China could emulate based on existing examples. The world is fascinated by the ongoing construction of China's second aircraft carrier, its first fully indigenously built aircraft carrier. We can see the photos coming out of Dalian Naval Shipyard, and there's rampant speculation as to what type of carrier exactly is under construction there. So far, it looks like the carrier will be rather modest and conservative in its overall design. As far as I can tell, it looks like it will be similar to the Liaoning in many respects. So, of course, it won't be identical. As often happens with this type of Chinese effort, China will put in a variety of its own systems to increase the performance of the carrier. So at the margins, it will be an improvement, and Chinese sources will make much of that and emphasize just how new and indigenous it is. But unless I'm mistaken, it seems likely that this Liaoning 2.0 with Chinese characteristics and improvements, if you will still have a fundamental limitation of Liaoning, and that is a ski jump style deck. Now, in carrier aviation, as one of my former colleagues likes to say, there's no such thing as a free launch. So what this means is the more you optimize or build the carrier design around making it easier to launch things, the less you can launch. And this old Soviet style of having a sort of ski jump type ramp, well, it obviates the need for advanced catapults, which are very hard to build and operate. It also means that the J-15 aircraft, fighter aircraft that China's operating, they can't carry, first of all, it's a lightweight aircraft. Second of all, it can't carry much in the way of fuel and weapons loadouts. And indeed, this is very similar to the limitations faced by the Sukhoi 33 aircraft that on which the J-15 is strongly based, and which was the aircraft of choice for the old Soviet-style Kuznetsov-class aircraft carriers, upon which Liaoning itself is based here. So the problem here for China is that deck aviation is really not so much about the ship that supports everything. That's just the basic buy-in, so to speak. A country as capable as China should be able to master that in the near future. It's really the complex system of systems of aviation operations operating off the carrier. That's the key value of the carrier. That's the key to the carrier's ability to project power in the form of the ability to conduct actual strikes. But this gets us to the larger point of where is China headed with its deck aviation development? And while Liaoning is clearly a starter carrier and sort of the carrier version of a starter home and a stepping stone to something greater down the road in Chinese carrier development, what lies further down that road for China? I think we can see from Chinese writings and Chinese approaches a clear two-part effort. The first part involves, in the near term, trying to achieve UK and French-style carrier operations capabilities. A more basic type of carrier operations capability that nevertheless can be taken globally, at least for lower intensity, non-combat type operations. And I think China is moving well along that road. That is a realistic initial road for China, and China is making progress down that road. But clearly, in keeping with its strong image as a great power, China really wants to achieve the gold standard in naval operations more broadly and carrier operations more specifically. And here we can see strong Chinese efforts to, over time, achieve, in at least most respects, a US-style gold standard. China's definitely making some progress in this regard, but also has some way to go. As I mentioned earlier, ONI's report from 2015 suggests that it will be several years before Liaoning has an operational air wing embarked. And by operational, this means capable up to the limited standards of Liaoning as a carrier. Now, critical even to that basic start, critical to the speed at which China achieves that basic benchmark, will be the amount of risk that China is willing to take in the aviation operations training. And this is quite an important decision, and it is not a simple decision. Such operations are extremely difficult, demanding, dangerous, and frankly, in some ways, fraught with risk, particularly as they become more realistic, further out over water at different times of under different weather conditions, at night. These are all things that can be quite hard to do, and occasionally there are accidents. The U.S. has gotten much better since the 1950s when it lost literally hundreds of its best pilots and aircraft. Now, China doesn't have to completely repeat that pattern in order to get good at air operations. There are a lot of safety procedures that the U.S. has learned, that it has implemented, that China can understand and emulate. But a certain degree of risk is inherent in air operations, carrier air operations, particularly if China wants to make progress at a certain speed beyond a certain level. And I think China's taken a rather cautious approach so far, and I think will continue to do so. But even with this cautious approach, there may well ultimately be accidents, and that's difficult, especially with this relatively small group of initial highly capable aviators that China has. The loss of any one of them would be felt very acutely. So this speaks somewhat to the speed and the extent of Liaoning's operational development. But looking more broadly and looking out further, it's worth mentioning a few other issues that China is going to have to deal with to develop its deck aviation operations. One of them is overseas repair. Overseas supply for China's Navy appears to be developing fairly significantly. There's no substitute for experience, and China's 22 anti-piracy task forces since December 26, 2008 have provided a strong basis for logistics and supply development and innovation. Now we're seeing China develop some sort of a basic naval supply and logistics facility in Djibouti, which its state media most recently is calling a quote-unquote outpost. So I think in time for deck aviation operations further from China, China will have a reasonable degree of supply set up. And we can see China developing a new set of long-range replenishment ships, very closely based apparently on U.S. replenishment ships that appear to have the right type of setup and configuration to supply China's future aircraft carriers. Now, what still is largely undeveloped here is remote repair capabilities. And to have any sort of very significant overseas deck aviation capabilities, that remote repair logistics train is going to have to be developed a lot more from its current very nascent stage. So this is one of several areas that China really has in which China really has its work cut out for it. Finally, there's the issue of using the aircraft carriers to best advantage. And this gets us back to the beginning of our discussion about what are Chinese aircrafters really for? Why is China developing this? Well, obviously, there is a deep symbolic value in a sense that as a great power, China should have just such a capability. But there's really more to it than that, and especially a capable and somewhat ambitious country like China wants more than a symbolic capability. So that raises the issue of how to employ the aircraft carriers to greatest effect over time. I've spoken to some of the technological and logistical underpinnings, but there's much more to it than that. There's how to actually have decision makers use aircraft carriers effectively the way that U.S. decision makers do now and have for years, and the way in which the capability and the awareness and the decision-making interface that makes U.S. presidents frequently say, where's the closest carrier? For China to have some sort of some analogous capability in the future, it has to further strengthen its civil military decision-making capability so that it has the ability in real time to think of using carriers as geopolitical or operational chess pieces, as if you will, out in the ocean and in key regions and responding to key events as Beijing desires. And here, a wide variety of extremely rapid and sweeping reforms will eventually, to the degree that they're successful, play a role in making that possible. I'm speaking, of course, of Xi Jinping's ongoing military reforms, in which he is ordering, literally ordering the party's army, the party's military, to become far more joint, integrated, high-tech, capable, and war-fighting focused. This is clearly a Herculean bureaucratic struggle and endeavor right now. Many rice bowls have to be smashed for this to be fully realized. There's a lot of pushback in any bureaucracy, and attempting something on such with such rapidity on such a sweeping scale would be difficult in any major bureaucracy. And Xi Jinping is trying to do this faster and in a more categorical fashion than is typically done. But those efforts, to the extent to which China succeeds with them in coming years, will offer a critical underpinning in decision-making and coordination that would have an impact on China's actual ability to make full use of whatever carriers it is fielding, let's say, by the mid to late 2020s, when it conceivably could have several, perhaps enough so that one is always available for operations, even as another is under refit and a third is under training, and perhaps even with the idea that under certain emergencies, with certain proper coordination, maybe China could have two available for operational purposes. Of course, China's shipbuilding industry is really developing to quite a high capacity level. Looking out towards 2030, we could see many more warships, including carriers, under construction. And as Chinese websites and media sources like to say, in recent years, China has literally been putting warships to sea like dumping dumplings into the soup broth. So we'll see more of that, and China could have even more carriers than the number that I'm describing. but it is not easy or quick to do that. So until we see further evidence, I think that's roughly what we might anticipate.